the Mo Ibrahim Foundation is highlighting the need for the greater consideration of Africa's specific position within the global debate on climate change, and that's ahead of the upcoming COP27 in Egypt. Now, at this year's 2022 Governance Forum, the foundation released a comprehensive analysis of the challenges and the prospects of the global climate crisis from Africa's perspective. Now, exploring the specific impacts of the climate crisis in Africa, they found that without climate action, 39.7 million additional people in sub-Saharan Africa could be pushed into extreme poverty by 2030, and that's more than in any other world region. Now, the region is also expected to see the displacement and migration of up to 85.7 million people. The report also analyzed Africa's critical challenge of striking the right balance between climate protection and access to energy for all. Now, over 600 million currently lack access to electricity and 930 million lack access to clean cooking fuels, making the continent one with the lowest rates of energy access globally. The report highlights the need to rethink the one-size-fits-all policies adopted at a COP26, such as excluding gas as a key transition fuel. At 455.2 trillion cubic feet in 2020, Africa's natural gas reserves could go a long way to meeting the continent's growing energy demand. Now, the research also highlights Africa's large resource potential, with the continent possessing all the key assets to accelerate the global transition to a green and sustainable economy. Africa holds about 30% of the world's mineral reserves, many of which are key to building green or low carbon technologies such as energy storage and solar panels, amongst others. Well, at this year's Governance Forum, organized by the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, delegates did delve deeper into these findings. And joining us live from the forum in London is one of those speakers, Anne Nyambane. She's an energy expert consultant with the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization in Uganda. Great to have you with us on the show today, Anne. Now, we certainly cannot ignore how the climate crisis in Africa intersects with pre-existing social and development issues on the continent. Africa is already the most vulnerable continent to climate change, but how do the continent's pre-existing development challenges make that situation even more worse?
Yeah, thank you so much, Uche, for having me. And it's really interesting that looking at the many challenges that the African continent have in terms of looking at the poverty levels that are very high. We also have food insecurity that is very rampant, that in most households within the continent, you find that people cannot afford to eat 3 meals a day. And we also go beyond looking at food security to nutrition security, whereby you find that the kind of food that are being eaten is not nutritious enough. So looking at all those challenges, we have energy insecurity. As you've mentioned, some of the key figures talking about the number of people who do not have access to electricity and all that. And then looking at the poverty levels. So when you bring in the impacts of climate change into that dynamic, it makes the situation even worse. So if you look at, for example, the livelihood of many Africans, it's agriculture. So the moment there is any climate change event, it means that the food that is being produced is even not going to be enough. And also looking at the electricity, for example, most of it is produced from hydropower. So if there's any changes in climate, it means that that impacts on the kind of electricity that is being generated and all that. So it just brings a very different kind of dynamic to make it even more vulnerable for this for us as a continent. So it's really important for us to start thinking about how do we actually address this kind of vulnerability and also ensure that the continent's population is resilient to any impacts of climate change at the moment. So yeah.
And certainly the rest of the world knows this. And one of the debates or discussions you're having is the fact that there is a need for greater consideration of Africa's specific vulnerabilities within global climate solutions going forward. What are your thoughts on that? And also, what are some of the Africa-specific vulnerabilities that the global world really needs to take note of?
Yeah, it's true that most Africa, actually, people understand the kind of vulnerability that Africa is facing. But I think one thing that is really lacking is the fact that people are not putting a human face into this vulnerability. It looks like some obscene or some very obscene thing that is happening. But once we put a human face into this kind of debate, then it actually brings the solutions home. And for me, I think that we really need to, first of all, contextualize the situation to really understand that Africa is, first of all, a continent, but we also have different vulnerability that is happening within individual countries and individual regions within the country. That is the first thing. And then the second thing is about looking at how we can actually use the indigenous or traditional knowledge that is within the continent or within the different countries. And also the last thing is, how do we actually localize some of the innovation that we bring so that it's more relatable for us as a continent. I think that is how we are going to address, so that it's more of, we really understand the context of Africa, try to address the issues that we are facing by localizing all those innovations.
But one of
Yeah.
the tougher debates going on right now is energy, and of course, striking the right balance between climate protection and access to energy for all in Africa. What's an acceptable trade off between development on the continent, of which we need power and energy,
Yeah.
and of course, those climate goals when it comes, of course, to bridging Africa's energy gap as well?
Yes. So for me, actually, I would like to take it back and look at, because, before we used to talk about win-win situation, but for me, I think that trying to look at how to maximize some of the synergies that are actually available, and also try to limit on the trade-offs, that will be actually the key thing. And also just trying to understand what role does energy actually play when it comes to development. And I think that's where the discussions should start. And I think that currently, if Africa does not address the energy gap that is currently existing, it means that we don't care about the 600 million people who actually do not have access to electricity. And we do not care about the almost 930 million people who are using traditional cooking technologies and fuels that are actually bad for their health. And also women spending so many hours actually working just to look for firewood that they can actually use for a day or two, and then they go back to looking for that. So it means that there's a lot that really needs to be addressed in that sphere. And it's time that we as a continent actually look at we have so much resources. And just looking through the resources that are available, for example, solar, we have wind, we have hydro, we also have gas that we actually need to use, so that to ensure that we actually make that jump that we need to make, so that we are able to cater for, to address the different poverty issues that is currently available, the food insecurities, the industrialization that we need to do as a continent to ensure that the well-being of the people. So for me, it's about us ensuring that we focus on ensuring that the continent is actually secure enough and resilient enough. They are able to adapt to any climate change impacts that come within. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's about trade-offs, it's about ensuring that we develop the continent and let it be to as far as where the rest of the world
World
is,
is.
to ensure that
But
the
right, but
citizens are.
what about the upcoming COP27 then, where we're going to
Yeah.
discuss all these things? It will be
Yeah.
hosted here in Africa. Are you confident that Africa's unique position, some of the issues we've put on the table today, do you think they will be better understood and taken into account at the next COP?
Uh, Okay, regarding the COP happening in Africa, I think the challenges that Africa faces have been known for a very long time. And the fact that the COP is happening in Africa, it is an opportunity for us, but we really need to be strategic as a continent to actually see how we are going to capitalize on this opportunity that has availed is in our door. And it reminds me that whoever is the drama is the one who controls how the music is. And I hope that all the African governments will actually come together, come with one key message, and the key message should be about ensuring that no citizen within the African continent is sleeping hungry. No citizen within the continent is actually does not have access to electricity. no citizen should actually be using the traditional kind of fuels to actually do the cooking. And that is the kind of messages that we have, but we really have to really harmonize that. We need to take advantage that it's happening in our home, and we need to be the one, because we'll be the host. We have to control what is happening there. So we have to come with a very unified message on what we want for our continent. Yeah.
Well, we do have to leave it there, Anne. Thank you so much for those great insights. That, of course, is Anne Nyambane. She is an energy expert consultant with the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization.